Hey y'all, hey, you got Marcy here, the curly-haired half of the Handmade Harriells, and today I'm sharing my tips for successful cutting because successful cutting is what leads to successful sewing, and we are all about sewing success up in here. Let's go. I've picked up a few tried and true techniques over my years of sewing, and often when you get to a certain point in your sewing career, a certain advanced point, you forget the simple things that you learned that seemed like Greek to you at first and are now just second nature. Those are the things that I want to share with you today, but they are also tips that can help you if you're an advanced sewist, things that you might not have thought of before. Because listen, there is always something new to learn in sewing. That's what makes it so wonderful. When I first started sewing, I had the option of cutting out my fabric on the hardwood floor, on the bed, or on the ironing board. I will let you guess which of those three choices were a very bad choice. Yeah, the first dress I ever cut, I cut on top of my king-size mattress because it was a nice big open space, and I didn't even bother to remove the bedding. The bed was nicely made, so I thought that's a nice, beautiful, flat surface. It was not flat. It was very bumpy. It was very lumpy. The dress came out. Was it the best thing I've ever made? No. Was I insanely proud of it? Absolutely, because I made it with my own two hands. But I learned that there were better options for me. The hardwood floor can be an excellent option. Yes, your back will eventually not thank you for that position. I actually count laying my fabric out on the ironing board as one of the reasons for my early sewing success, because it taught me what every large costume shop knows. Laying fabric out on fabric means less chance of shifting around. They will lay a layer of cotton down first and then place their fabric on top of it in order to cut it out. Fabric touching fabric means there's going to be less shifting for your fabric, especially on a shifty piece like this. This fabric is a chiffon and it is super shifty, okay? When we place fabric down on fabric, it doesn't want to move on you as much. It has a little magnetic attraction. It has a desire to stay together. Now, if we take a smooth surface such as this, okay? Let's just pretend this is maybe a hardwood floor, a nice smooth surface. You put your fabric down on that, it wants to move. It wants to slip and slide around. So especially if you're working with a tricky fabric, placing it on top of fabric to cut it is the way to go. Now, of course, not everybody has the space in their sewing nook or the dining room table, you know, wherever you have to sew, to actually have that kind of layout. You know, you just think positive and manifest that ish, or get you a big piece of plywood, as I've done here, covered in some cotton batting and then covered again in some 100% cotton. Staple guns to the underneath. You've got another choice when it comes to cutting out fabric, and that is what you're gonna use to keep it where you want it. I'm talking about pins, and I'm talking about clips, and I'm talking about weights. My preferred method has gotta be the weights. Every time you use a pin to pin your paper and fabric together, you are creating a tiny little bump. All of those tiny little bumps are little microaggressions that are eventually going to add up to one big aggression. It's creating a space between the fabric that you're cutting and the cutting surface. Those little spaces are going to add up to a cutting error. Your pattern might be a little bigger than you intended. Your curves might not be quite as curvy as they should be. That's why I eschewed pins a long time ago and went with these washers. This gigantic boy right here, I got this guy at Ace Hardware. I went and I asked my guys, what's the biggest washer you have? And they pulled this out and they said, nobody ever buys this. And I said, today, my friends, somebody's buying it. let's test it out. Let's do a little test for science, okay? Here we've got this glorious cotton wax print that I'm about to delve into. When you're laying out fabric on fabric and you want to pin through that, it's actually not as easy. So if I was going to use pins, which I'm not, I would slide my ruler or another slick surface underneath it and then pin it that way. Now you can see just when I put that pin through, the whole thing shifted. So you could set up your grain line, you could throw some weights down to be sure that the paper's staying where it does, but every time you put a pin in, you're moving it. You have no choice but to move it. You can't just teleport the pin into that paper. On the flip side, if you get your grain line all set up, and then you just place your weights wherever you need them to be, you're not shifting the pattern at all. Pins are wonderful, but this, my friends, is not the time for pins. Or clips. If you're a clip kind of person, clips will run you into the same problem. All right? Weights. Weights, my friends. Go for weights. You know what you can even find? Come on, how about it? How cute. These were all in Rob's grandfather's garage. She had like, I feel like a dozen of them. I painted them gold because gold. If you've got a real heavy fabric and you need a weight, nothing's going anywhere under that bad boy. That is a vintage iron. You can find these in estate sales. You can find them in garage sales. You can find them in antique shops. You can find them maybe in your grandfather's garage. Now we've got to choose our weapon, okay? Weapon. For me, that's usually my Kai scissors because they are soft and they don't hurt my hands. But I'm also a rotary girl when I need to be. I've got a couple options here. We've got the Duo Loop from Fiskars, which you saw in my video right here, which has interchangeable blades and they're held in by a magnet and it can go to the left or the right hand side of your hand. So these are great for options. Gotta have options. I've also got a smaller blade here with my Kai rotary cutter. And this little baby is great because you know how you always have to put the safety lock? You have to put the blade back down when you put the rotary cutter down. On this little bad boy, the only way that blade is coming out is if you actually press down on the fabric. Oh, a little birdie just went past. The only way that the blade is coming out on this is if you actually put pressure to cut. Okay, I can run my finger right over this and I'm not actually touching the blade. You see that? I'm not touching the blade. That blade's not coming out until I actually put pressure down. Of course, if you're cutting with a rotary cutter, you're gonna wanna use a cutting mat. You're not gonna wanna cut with a rotary cutter on your fabric pressing board or on your ironing board. That's gonna make you sad. That's gonna ruin whatever lies underneath. Now, word to the wise, if you do choose something like these Kai scissors, be forewarned, they cut all the way to the tip. So when you're cutting into your fabric, you wanna be sure you are not angling down. You want to keep those straight. If you point down, you see how that little divot's happening in the fabric? You are going to cut through the fabric of your pressing board or your ironing board. Keep it straight, keep it tight. I'll put links to all of these cutting tools down in the description box. Now, I want you to know, I have tried a lot of cutting tools. I started off using, those super heavy, all metal, very sexy shears. You know the ones I'm talking about. And they're beautiful and they're wonderful and maybe they're right for you. They hurt my hands like whoa. Maybe if you want some longevity in your sewing career, and I think you do, make sure the weapon that you choose isn't a weapon that's actually harming your digits. But I encourage you to try multiple options of cutting because there might be something out there that you didn't know existed that fits your life better, that gives you sewing longevity, and we want sewing longevity. When I first started sewing, I didn't have physical teachers. I had the internet, which back then was basically Berta style when it was a free site. And that was, as an old friend of mine said, the blind leading the blind. And it really was. We all loved sewing, and we all decided, because we had been sewing for like, I don't know, a couple of months, we were all experts in it, and we all were cheerleaders for each other. We all did a lot of wrong things back then, but we had a real good time. I also had vintage sewing books, found at, again, estate and garage sales. And one of those books said, the tailor will cut with his scissors, with the pattern and the fabric to the right of the scissors, professionally and precisely. It then went on to say that the seamstress will cut with her scissors with the fabric and pattern to the left of the scissors with haste. And the implication was without precision. Now, you know, when I read that, I raged against the misogynistic machine, and I decided I was going to cut like a tailor cuts. That's basically how I got my preference for cutting. I always cut with the pattern and the fabric to the right of the scissors. When I cut in this orientation, I can see where my scissors are going. Try it both ways and see which actually feels better to you. Because there's no gendered way of cutting. There's no right or wrong answer here. Here is something that I find to be a hard and fast rule though. Whichever way you choose, be sure that you are always cutting in the same orientation all the way around your pattern. Don't cut this one with the scissors oriented as such and this side with the scissors oriented as such, because the way that you hold your scissors and the way you cut is going to dictate how well you cut out your pattern. And so you always want them oriented in the same direction all the way around the pattern. That's going to give you an equal and lovely cut, no matter if you're a tailor or a seamstress or a ziz or a zem or whatever you choose to be, whatever kind of lovely human you are. Don't pay attention to my videos where sometimes I'm cutting on one side and sometimes I'm cutting on the other. That's for camera, that's for economality, because I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing, and I'm trying not to stretch my arm across something so you can't actually see what I'm doing. Do as I say, not as I do. Now, when you're actually cutting, I know you've heard this before, you are instructed to take nice, long, beautiful cuts where you close your scissors all the way to the tip every time. I'm actually not going to advise you to do that. Not everywhere. Maybe on this nice long straightaway here, but on this curve, if you were to take nice long even cuts where you close those scissors every time, you're not going to get the curve you want. It's actually better to take little bites in a curve like this. So when I'm cutting, I'm taking little snips. You see? Here is where we fall into the gymnastics that I have to do for camera for you guys so that you can see what I'm doing. Normally, if I'm on camera, I'll just cut around the other way, even though I prefer to cut as the tailor cuts, just so you can see what I'm doing. You can see that gave me a nice curve right where I wanted it, right along the pattern. Try it out both ways. Try some nice, giant, elegant bites with your scissors, and then try some little snips and see which you prefer. This is all about trial and some error so that you can get to success. Well, as you can see, I've been prepping a Vogue pattern here this entire time. Vogue 1898, which if you saw my last video, you'll know that it's something that I need to slam sew, like right now. If you want to see the results of that, do check me out on Instagram or hop on over to the YouTube community tab. Be sure you like and subscribe so that you can see the results. I'll see you back here. Peace out, everybody. Emphasis on peace and cutting.